I started 2020 with 425 credits, with the expectation that I would clear the 500 mark by the end of the year. Instead of getting over 75 new credits, I ended up with a grand total of 19, and I consider myself lucky to get that many. But I was able to get to some new parks that I had wanted to get to for years, and ride all of the good new stuff in America, so the year wasn't completely a wash. Looking back at these 19 credits, I picked out the ones that I liked the best, and the ones that I was either disappointed in or just flat out hated. These are the winners and losers of my New-For-2020 credits. Winners and losers don't necessarily equate to good and bad. It has a lot to do with expectations. When I did this format for my April 2019 trip, I put Lightning Rod on the loser list, even though it's in my top 5, just because the rides that I had were disappointing. You're gonna see a couple on this list that are quality rides, but didn't meet my expectations. We'll start with a couple honorable mentions. The loser that just missed this list is Cyclops at Mount Olympus, a CCI wooden coaster. This was the first coaster the park installed, and I got pretty hyped up for that amazing drop as the climax of the ride. This drop wasn't nearly as strong as it looks, or as a lot of people make it seem, even when taken in the back row. The beginning of this ride had some surprising airtime in the back, so that keeps it off the official list, but I was pretty excited for this coaster and it let me down. The winner that just missed this list is Diamondback at Frontier City, an aerodynamic shuttle loop. I had been waiting for my first aero shuttle loop experience for over 2 years, ever since both Sidewinder and Diamondback were closed for me during my 2018 cross-country trip. I got back to my new home park of Frontier City in August, and this time it was open, and it was every bit as good as I thought it could be. The airtime coming off those 2 stations is great if you're in the front or the back. Ride it in the front if you want the crazy backwards airtime off the second launch, and the intensity of the loop is also great. I think it's the best ride in the park, and if it's open when I go, I'll get as many rides as I can because it may not be around forever. My number 5 loser is Tigger Coaster at Indiana Beach, a Schwarzkopf Jetstar. On my Indiana Beach Coasters Rank video, I said that this park doesn't have a bad coaster, but this one was the most disappointing. After experiencing Jetstar 2 at Lagoon, Tigger Coaster is pretty mild. It's great to have a mild family-style coaster, and if I hadn't gone in expecting the intensity of Jetstar 2, I may have appreciated it more. It reminds me of when I rode Hang Time expecting Cannibal, and then realizing that it doesn't even come close. It's only number 5, so it wasn't too disappointing, and I do appreciate it being my first coaster post-COVID outbreak. So Tigger Coaster, you're alright. My number 5 winner is in the same park, Cornball Express, a CCI wooden coaster. I would have called this a loser after my first ride near the back. It didn't have any of the great airtime as advertised. It does have buzz bars, which meant you could really go flying out of your seat, but I don't think I left my seat once. One mistake I made was not riding this all the way in the back row. Next time I will. But I was able to snag a front row ride, and that ride puts this in the winner circle. At the top of every hill, I was flying out of my seat, and Cornball went from my 3rd favorite in the park all the way up to number 1. It's too bad that you have to ride all the way in the back or in the very front to get these awesome rides, but as long as you know where to sit, you're gonna have a great time. My number 4 loser is Texas Stingray at SeaWorld San Antonio. GCI usually does a solid job. Their coasters are usually good, but nothing to go crazy about. But then they went off and had to build Mystic Timbers. This out and back airtime machine changed my view of what GCI could be, and I thought that they may be incorporating elements like this into their new models. Texas Stingray has good looking hills and a straight drop, but what I got from the ride wasn't anything special. It was just like your basic GCI. Very similar to Apocalypse in feel, kinda similar to Roar in layout, and I came off very underwhelmed. I went in with Mystic Timbers on my mind, and that's what probably ruined it for me. It also didn't help that I didn't get a ride later in the day, and the train was running at half capacity. So maybe under better circumstances, it would have been better. But until then, this is just the middle of the road GCI, and I wasn't impressed. My number 4 winner is yet another Indiana Beach coaster, Steel Hog, an SNS El Loco. I loved everything about this coaster. Even those stupid shoulder bars didn't bother me. This was the last credit I needed from Indiana Beach, and I came off thinking that it was the best ride in the park. Then I rode Cornball in the front row and I changed my mind. I still rank Steel Hog higher on my winners list because it exceeded my expectations. I've ridden El Loco at Adventure Dome, and I like it, but this was even better. The drop is short, but it's powerful. The banking is weird, but it works. It's got positives and negatives, and the finale is that downward sloped roll, which is amazing. More small parks should get these. I like them better than Eurofighters, and they fit on an even smaller plot. My number 3 loser is Candemonium at Hershey Park, a B&M Hyper. If you saw my review for this, you know that I thought it kind of fell flat, especially when it came to length. It's on the shorter side, and the second half isn't all that thrilling, so I said it's sort of half of a ride. It's on the loser list, but it's still in my top 50, because you can't go wrong with a B&M Hyper, and it still brings the floater airtime, especially on that first camelback and the speed hill. But overall, I thought it was lackluster. The shorter 7-row train took away from some of the good whip, and it was cold, and the train was half full, which I didn't think helped either. B&M Hypers could be as high as my top 10, but this one is barely hanging on to a top 50 spot. I do owe it some re-rides in the summer heat and with a full train. My number 3 winner is Hades 360 at Mount Olympus, a Gravity Group wooden coaster. This is such a polarizing coaster. Everyone seems to agree that it's a crazy ride, but some people can't stand it for its roughness, while other people think it's just fine. I went into the ride expecting to be beaten to death, and I'll be honest, it did beat me, but just a little. It by no means took away from the greatness of the ride or that incredible layout. I can see where it could give you a headache. After my second back row ride, I was feeling it a little bit, and I knew that any more would have been too much. But I've ridden coasters where one ride is more than enough, and this was definitely tolerable for the whole layout. It's one of the most impressive wooden coasters that I've ever seen, and it exceeded the hype. My number 2 loser is Swiss Toboggan at Little America, a Chance Rides toboggan. These were popular back in the 1970s, with 32 being manufactured, and just one still listed as operating, this one being at Little America in Marshall, Wisconsin. I got the chance to ride this funky thing back in June, and one ride was definitely enough. Not only was the ride boring and janky, it actually messed me up pretty good. You sit in the enclosed car, and the roof will probably push your head down unless you're really short. So the whole time you're looking down. There's a vertical lift, which is definitely the best part of the ride, and then you spiral down the tower and pick up speed, before a couple hills and turns before going back into the station. The first hill is where I felt my neck crack, and I was in pretty good pain for about a week afterward. It was worth the rare credit and the experience, but I can't imagine ever getting back on it and putting myself through another week of pain just for a re-ride. My number 2 winner is Zippin' Pippin at Bay Beach, a Gravity Group Woody. In one weekend, I picked up 2 amazing Gravity Groups that both landed in my top 50. I had no expectations for this one. It was just something that we could do to combine with Little America. From my experience, mid-sized wooden coasters at tiny parks have been mediocre at best. I'm thinking of rides like Silver Comet at Fantasy Island or the New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park. These were okay rides. You could ride them a few times. They don't really leave an impression, and then you move on. I thought Zippin' Pippin would be like this, especially because nobody seems to talk about it. But it wasn't like that at all. It was spectacular. Floater going down every hill. Ejector on that final hill, stronger than I think that I've ever felt, other than maybe Magnum's finale in the Magic Seat. I could ride this all day for the endless airtime. That is, assuming that my legs wouldn't get destroyed by the ejector death hill. It also helps that this is only $1 per ride, so I recommend going to Bay Beach with a $20 bill and just marathoning it if you have the time. My number 1 loser is Pegasus at Mount Olympus, a CCI wooden coaster. It doesn't get much worse than this rough and pointless wooden coaster. I guess it was supposed to be a family coaster, which I understand. You do need family-friendly coasters in your lineup to keep all your guests happy. This has a tiny drop, and then it just kind of meanders around in a circle with small dips. It ends with a couple of decent-sized hills, but then it has the worst transition that I've ever seen while it tries to burn off its speed. It's a violent moment that looks like it'll snap every neck in the train. I saw this happen before I rode it, so I was able to brace for it. But most people won't be aware of what's about to happen, so they're gonna get yonked to the left, especially the kids that this coaster is supposed to appeal to. Mount Olympus needs to tear down this awful thing right now before it falls apart or it hurts someone badly, and replace it with a Gravity Group family wooden coaster that's actually fun. CCI built Ghost Rider just 2 years after they built this. That doesn't even seem possible. My number 1 winner is Orion at Kings Island, a B&M Giga Coaster. For years, everyone was expecting Kings Island to be the next Cedar Fair park to get a Giga. It didn't happen in 2017, but Cedar Fair delivered in 2020. When something is expected and hyped up for so long, people's expectations are raised. This is unfortunate for Orion, because what we got seems short and half-baked. Some people expected it to pass up Fury as the coaster with the world's tallest drop, and what they got was a 287-foot lift, with a drop that dips into lower ground to hit that 300-foot mark. It also barely clears the mile mark in track length. It was basically a shorter version of Leviathan, which is kind of seen as a short ride itself. And it didn't seem possible for B&M to progress from Leviathan to Fury, and then regress back to Orion. So naturally, the thing got flamed by enthusiasts. But then it opened up in July, and people got to ride it, and you started seeing the tide change. I got to ride it in September, and notched 3 rides in the back and 1 in the front, and I was very impressed. You can't compare it to Fury, it's just not fair. But when I stack Orion against all the other Gigas, it stands at the top. It has unique elements, good airtime moments, some intensity, lots of speed, and it broke all the way into my top 25. It just goes to show, don't judge it until you ride it. It's not my favorite coaster in the world, but it landed on the upper end of my expectations, and I think it was a great addition to the park. And as my highest ranked New-For-2020 credit, I'm putting it as my #1 winner. Those are my coaster winners and losers from what I rode for the first time in 2020. I also want to mention probably the biggest overall winner of the year, Indiana Beach. This park looked like it was done for when Apex shut it down in February, but it found a buyer and was able to reopen with everything mostly intact by late June. This park is full of quality and unique coasters, and it would have been a shame to lose it. Let me know what you thought of the coasters on this list. Keep in mind that it isn't a best and worst coasters that I rode this year, just the ones that I consider my winners and losers, mainly based off my expectations. What coasters did you get to ride for the first time this year? And which one surprised you or disappointed you? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like. It really helps the channel out. And stay tuned later this week for a video looking at the biggest 2020 winners and losers from my existing credits. That video will be about which rides gave me an entirely new impression, good or bad. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.